Then Fingolfin beheld, as it seemed to him, the utter ruin of the Noldor, and the defeat beyond redress of all their houses. And filled with wrath and despair, he mounted upon Roquelaure, his great horse, and rode forth alone, and none might restrain him. He passed over Dor Newfauglith like a wind amid the dust, and all that beheld his onset fled in amaze, thinking that Orome himself was come, for a great madness of rage was upon him, so that his eyes shone like the eyes of the Valar. Thus he came alone to Angband's gates, and he sounded his horn, and smote once more upon the brazen doors, and challenged Morgoth to come forth to single combat. And Morgoth came. Mygovan and my friends, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will finally discuss the mighty warrior of the Elves who challenged Morgoth himself to a duel, High King Fingolfin. There are related articles and videos in the description and cards. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me. Let's begin our tale. The story of Fingolfin begins back in the Elder Days, during the Years of the Trees, as he was the second-born son of Finwë, the first king of the Noldor. But Fingolfin was the first son of both Finwë and Indis, the union that occurred after the death of Míriel, Fëanor's mother. Fëanor, Fingolfin's older half-brother, and the true firstborn son of Finwë, would of course greatly affect the history of Middle-earth, and during his life, he would be clearly jealous of Fingolfin especially. But Fingolfin, despite his half-brother's evils and misdoings, would always treat him with respect and love. And so Fingolfin, whose name may mean Wise Finwë after his father, or magical skill, who was quite tall with dark hair, was born in 1190 of the Years of the Trees, in the city of Tirion, the city of his father and people, the Noldor High Elves. Of the children of Finwë, Fingolfin would grow to become the strongest and most valiant, not being as crafty or fearsome as his half-brother Fëanor, nor as kindly and wise as his younger brother Finarfin. To further exude this strength and valor of character and body, Fingolfin would later wear silver armor and bear a blue shield set with crystals. His sword would be Ringel, which glittered like ice, and his steed was Roquelaure, as loyal and quick as his master was valiant. He would use all of these implements and ride upon this steed while in Beleriand in Middle-earth. But of course, during his time in Tirion, the city of the Noldor in the land of Valinor, Fingolfin would need no such implements of war, or so he believed. For Fingolfin and his kin, life was quite peaceful. Fingolfin would marry Enarie, a Noldo who bore 4 children, Fingon, Turgon, Erethel, and Argon. Things were good until the unchaining of Melkor during the days of the Two Trees. The Dark Lord, acting as though he had reformed, spread lies to bring unrest to the Noldor. To Fëanor, these lies spoke of his usurpation, and that of his father Finwë by the hands of Fingolfin and his sons by the will of the Valar, for the Valar wanted the Silmarils according to this lie. To Fingolfin and Finarfin, however, it was said that Fëanor had small love for the children of Indis, which was true enough, but that now Fëanor had become great and had his father's favor, it would not be long before Fëanor drove his younger half-siblings from Tuna, the hill of Tirion. It seems, however, that these lies had less effect upon the children of Indis, Fingolfin and Finarfin, than upon the son of Míriel, Fëanor, for discontent towards the Valar began to spread in Tirion, led by Fëanor himself. Thus, in the hopes to quell this social discontent, Finwë called the lords of the Noldor to council, and Fingolfin, his second-born son, came there first, hoping his father would restrain the pride of Fëanor, for Fëanor spoke these ill things against the Valar as if he were king. It was Finwë who led the Noldor to the promise of Valinor, and Fingolfin and his dear younger brother Finarfin still held true to these hopes, even if Fëanor did not. But even as Fingolfin spoke, Fëanor entered the room, believing this to be further proof of his half-brother's betrayal. Fëanor had with him a high helm and a mighty sword, both of which he had crafted at a secret forge, for never were such things needed by the Elves in Valinor before. Fëanor spoke fell words to Fingolfin, and Fingolfin bowed before Finwë and left. Fëanor followed him, and with his sword, Fëanor placed the point of it against his half-brother Fingolfin's breast, threatening to rid Valinor of he who Fëanor thought to be a traitor, only seeking power. Fingolfin, surely quite upset by this action, still passively walked away from Fëanor, seeking Finarfin in silence. The seeds of evil were sown by Melkor indeed. And so to answer for this crime, Fëanor was summoned by the Valar, and Fingolfin was summoned as well, for he had been wronged. Mandos gave his judgment of exile to Fëanor, and that after some time Fëanor should return if others would forgive him, to which Fingolfin replied that he would forgive his brother. And so, for some years, Fëanor was exiled from Tirion, and his father, King Finwë, went with him, leaving the rule of the Noldor indeed to Fingolfin, who would prove to be wise and good. And so, years later, during a festival in Valinor, in 1495 of the Years of the Trees, the two brothers were called together by the Valar once more, and as promised, Fingolfin forgave and released his brother, holding forth his hand to Fëanor, and saying that though Fëanor was his half-brother in blood, Fingolfin would be a full brother in heart to him. Fëanor would lead, and he would follow, hoping no new grief would divide them. So said Fingolfin. Fëanor accepted and agreed to this. Fingolfin said these things, not knowing what evils were about to befall the Elves, however. Surely Fingolfin's heart in this hour was full. His half-brother he had regained, and the lies of woe spread by Morgoth, who had fled, were amended, or so Fingolfin thought. In that same hour the two trees would be slain, and Melkor would murder Finwë and take the Silmarils from Formenos, the home of Fëanor. Fëanor would give into his vices wholly, soon after swearing his oath with his 7 sons and pledging to pursue Melkor into Middle-earth, naming him Morgoth. These ill deeds caused Fingolfin and his son Turgon to argue against Fëanor and his sons, almost coming to swords in their conflict. But in the end, Fëanor would lead those that would follow, and Fingolfin, against his better wisdom, would also go to Middle-earth for a few reasons. His son Fingon, who was good friends with his half-cousin Maethros, son of Fëanor, urged Fingolfin, his father, to go. Fingolfin would also not forsake his people and leave them to the rash counsels of Fëanor, who was now king of the Noldor, though many still followed Fingolfin instead. And finally, Fingolfin would follow because of what he had said before the throne of Manwë. Fingolfin had promised to follow Fëanor, hoping no new grief would divide them, and so he attempted to keep his word, though this would cost him much in the end. Already, he had lost his father to the Dark Lord, but in leaving Valinor he would not see his wife Anarié in this life again, for she would remain. He would lose more in the journey to come. But his host, greater than that of Fëanor, marched slower away from Valinor, being more loath to depart. Fingon led the front of Fingolfin's host, while Finarfin and Finrod, who were wisest, were at the rear, and some, including Finarfin himself, decided to stay after the first kinslaying at the docks of the seaport of Alqualande. But Fingolfin and many of his people pushed forth, even those in Fingon's part who had accidentally taken part in the kinslaying, not understanding what had happened. However, as the journey grew more difficult and perilous, some whispered doubts about Fëanor behind his back, and Fëanor learned of this, so he took the boats they had captured from the Falmari Sea Elves and went to Middle-earth that way, and after they arrived, they burned the ships, for Fëanor thought Fingolfin and his host would be useless baggage anyway. Fingolfin and his people, who were across the water, saw this, and fury and shame grew in them. Fury at this betrayal and shame to turn back. And so they pushed on, resolving to travel across the grinding ice of the Helcaraxe in the north, and come to Middle-earth that way, that Fingolfin might meet Fëanor again. I do wonder what that meeting would have been like, for surely Fingolfin grew wary and wrathful at Fëanor's betrayals. But this path through the north would not be easy, and as I said before, Fingolfin would lose much, including his daughter-in-law, Elenwe, Turgon's wife, who died in the grinding ice, along with others. In the end, however, at the first rising of the moon, the trumpets of Fingolfin's host sounded as they came into Middle-earth at last. Shortly after this, Fingolfin and his people came south into the Lammoth, and were attacked by the orcs of Angband in the Battle of the Lammoth. But Argon, son of Fingolfin, carved a path to the orc captain during the surprise attack, and he slew the captain. And though this action cost Fingolfin his youngest son, the battle was won for the Noldor, the first of many. Thus Fingolfin and his host came into Mithrim at the rising of the sun, and with his blue and silver banners and the horns of the mighty Noldor who followed him, Fingolfin came to the gates of Angband, knocking on them, challenging Morgoth to come forth with their trumpets, but he came not. So, not hearing the cries of Maethros, the eldest son of Fëanor and now king of the Noldor, bound to the face of a precipice upon the mountains of Thangordrim, Fingolfin led his people back to Mithrim. And east of Mithrim they would create Barad Eithel, Tower of the Well, which was the mountain fortress of Fingolfin and his son Fingon after him. Indeed, Fëanor was already slain, his forces depressed by this loss. though Fingolfin heard rumor that in Mithrim he would find the sons of Fëanor, who he held as accomplices of their father. Little love did Fingolfin's folk have for the followers of Fëanor, but they did not come to blows, having already lost much, and retaining their honor still, despite all that had happened. The curse of the Noldor was on them, however, so in this time the Noldor achieved nothing. Or rather, next to nothing, for Fingon, who had been good friends with Maethros, wanted to find his lost cousin, and he did just that, saving him from Thangorodrim, with the aid of the eagle Thorondor. After Maethros was saved by Fingon, son of Fingolfin, many of the woes between the Fëanorians and the Fingolfians were mended, and Maethros surrendered the high kingship of the Noldor to Fingolfin, who was the eldest of the house of Finwë in Middle-earth, and not the least wise. Fingolfin accepted this, and 20 years later he would hold a great feast for the Elves of Beleriand, during which many, not just the Noldor but some Sindar as well, would make alliances. It was called the Feast of Reuniting, as many elves, namely the Noldor, did reunite here. After settling in different places in the north, the Noldor, led by High King Fingolfin, utterly defeated Morgoth during the battle named Dagor Aglareb, the Glorious Battle, leading to the almost 400-year siege of Angband. Fingolfin boasted that, except by treason amongst the Noldor, Morgoth could never break from the leaguer of the Eldar, nor come at them by surprise. Morgoth would attempt to take back some of the northwest of Beleriand almost 100 years later, but would be foiled by Prince Fingon. After another 100 years, Glaurung, the first dragon, would burst forth prematurely from Angband and almost come to death. Indeed, the siege was strong, and would hold during the long peace in the First Age, and Fingolfin would send messengers to welcome men into Beleriand in friendship with the Noldor. Fingolfin would love the man Hodor among the third house of men, and would give to him the lordship of Dor Loman in South Hithlum. They would be his greatest vassal among men. After many years of growth and strength for the men and elves of Beleriand, Fingolfin, whose wisdom saw that Morgoth was not idle during these years in his fortress, hoped to make an assault upon him. But Fingolfin's people were content with how things were, so his designs came to naught. Thus, in 455 of the First Age, the fears of Fingolfin were realized, when sudden rivers of flame and poisonous fumes were set forth from Angband and Thangorodrim. The great many forces of Morgoth came out all at once in the Battle of Sudden Flame, and each lord of the Noldor had a different set of problems to deal with. The man Hador died defending his lord Fingolfin's rearguard, and the war went ill very quickly. Fingolfin would receive messages of their great many losses, and to him it seemed as though he was beholding the fall of his people. And so, the wise, valiant, and strong king, who had been hardened by the many difficult experiences of his life, rode forth alone upon his steed, Rokalor, and he came to the very gates of Angband, demanding that Morgoth come forth to fight him. Fingolfin had suffered much loss, and was for the Noldor their champion, even as his eyes shone like those of the Valar. Morgoth indeed came, and between them was a duel more renowned than any other in the history of Middle-earth. I did a video where I brought this battle to life, so please check that out for more specific details. Even as Fingolfin grew weary and was crushed to his knees 3 times, and 3 times he rose again, he stumbled and fell backward before the feet of Morgoth, for the very ground had been rent and pitted by Morgoth's weapon Grond. Even with Morgoth's foot upon his neck, Fingolfin delivered one last stroke and hewed the foot. Including that last stroke, he hit Morgoth with Ringil 8 times during this battle. Morgoth would bear these wounds for the rest of his time in Middle-earth, and would limp ever after. Thus, Fingolfin perished, and neither elves nor orcs boasted of that duel, but remembered it still. Thorondor, Lord of Eagles, marred the face of Morgoth, coming suddenly from the encircling mountains near Gondolin, and he seized Fingolfin's body before it could be fed to wolves, and he bore him from the battlefield before Angband. Rokalor, the steed of Fingolfin, escaped the wolves of Angband, and he came back to Hithlum before he died of a broken heart. Fingolfin's body would be carried to a mountaintop overlooking Gondolin, where Turgon, the second son of Fingolfin, built a cairn over the body of his father, that his memorial may overlook the greatest city of the Noldor in Middle-earth. Fingolfin would be remembered by all, but in later ages by his descendants that came from Gondolin especially, even while the High Kingship passed to Fingon, his firstborn son. In our years, Fingolfin was approximately 3,426 years old when he died. As for the spirit of Fingolfin, he would surely sit amongst the mightiest of elves, though he too had turned away from the Valar, if even for his people, and had suffered the doom of the Noldor. I know not if or when Fingolfin was ever reincarnated, and so we come to the end of the tale of High King Fingolfin, he who dueled Morgoth. From the story of Fingolfin, we see that through wisdom and valor, strength and love, there's never an evil too great for us to stand against, even if we must do so alone. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the story of Fingolfin. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections on this tale? Let me know in the comments below. Fingolfin is most definitely one of the greatest elves in Tolkien's works, and he is a very inspiring character to read about when we revisit the Elder Days. Middle-earth was truly dimmed by his loss. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons, Adrian de la Tour, Chris Ortner, Kyle Wetzel, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralik, Blair Scouten, Merton, John Hume, Jennifer Wood, Sam McBee, Matt Sabach, Quantum Catalyst, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Ben Gardner, Kondar, Reese Jenkins, Adam Petrulik, Kuzan, and Brandon Glidden, our newest Valar tier patron. Thank you so much, and thanks to all of our patrons, it really means a lot. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with a video on what happened during the long and fell winters of Middle-earth. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.